in my personal experience, if you have an idea of how to begin something, that's all you really need, because once the wheels start rolling, you can steer the car, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like a car that sits still is never going to necessarily go left or right. You just need to go forward to be able to turn the car left or right. And so as you begin, it's made evident to you along the path where you need to change course, or if the idea is even worth fleshing out to begin with.
You're listening to the Freio Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
Well, hello, my name is Adam Orfale, and I go under the pseudonym Feverkin for all my musical endeavors. I was born in Michigan, but pretty much most of my life was a little north of Atlanta. But I've been around. I've been in Los Angeles for a couple of years. Now I just settled into Portland, Oregon.
What brought you to Oregon?
So what brought me to Oregon is that I've never had the chance to actually live on my own by myself. So when I moved to Los Angeles, I made the move with a few buddies of mine who all do music as well from the East Coast. And we were in Los Angeles for 2 years. And unfortunately, we only got to experience the true Los Angeles for 10 months before COVID hit. But after the 2 years were over, everyone was kind of looking to go their own ways. And I thought it was a good time to just try living into a brand new city where I knew no one and living on my own without roommates, just to have that that experience, that shock experience. So yeah,
great.
Oregon's beautiful. Portland's a pretty neat city, but it could have been anywhere. It just happened to be Portland.
You kind of uprooted yourself, put yourself in a situation where you don't know people, you're getting new experiences. Is that a trend that you tend to do? Do you like seeking out the unknown?
I guess you could say so. I mean, we kind of all go back and forth. I oscillate, between security and some extreme uncomfort. Finding this apartment was not comfortable, but it's been a long time coming. I think I've always wanted to get into a position where I felt like I had enough internal resources to go do something like this, where I was comfortable enough with myself to just be in a brand new environment as a total stranger. So nothing quite like this ever. This is a first for me, to be honest. You ever done something like this?
No, but I did go to school in Eugene, so in Oregon, so a little bit south.
Oh, you went to Eugene?
Portland. Yep.
Okay, right on.
So I am familiar with the area, but I'm not familiar with moving to a city solo, uprooting in that regard.
Gotcha.
But,
okay.
But yeah, college was obviously a new experience for me, but I did know some people going. Props to you for moving, though. But you did it all during COVID, which is kind of interesting that you've taken this as an opportunity to change things up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I felt like, I personally wasn't too worried about COVID being a hindrance at the point I made the move. But,
sure.
Everyone was like, I think we were all going to leave Los Angeles at the first time the lease was up. But that was during the time where no one knew what was going on at all. So we were all like, we should probably just sign another year here.
I want to start with how you got into music and bring me back to your young childhood. Was there any musical memories that stick out, maybe listening to music or somebody around you playing it?
Oh, man. Honestly, the one that sticks out the most is there was this, every 4th of July, my family would go to this, laser show, fireworks show in Georgia. and there was this song that would play. It was an instrumental song, which is weird because it was such like a patriotic thing, like all these country songs or whatnot, like So America. But there was like this one like electronic song that would play, like so random, and the laser show would be all these like geometric shapes, and it'd be so abstract. And I remember as a kid, I'm just like, this is it. This is the coolest thing. This is the only thing I care about coming to this 4th of July thing. And I could never find out what that song was until like, oh geez, like 15 years later, a friend of my mom like burned this random CD for me, and it was on there. And I think the artist is Ray Lynch, but the song's called Celestial Soda Pop, and it's this like 80s synth like escapade that, I don't know, it's so cool. But like, I can't believe it took me 15 years to find that song, but that's stuck with me ever since. I had to have been, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old when I first heard that song.
Was it the audio or was it the visual experience that captivated you?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, honestly, I think it's both. It's kind of like been burned into my brain. For me, like music and visuals have always kind of gone hand in hand. I have a hard time just like listening to music on its own, to be honest. I have to have like something going on along with it.
When did you start to realize that you could create music?
Well, you know, my mom kind of threw me into piano lessons against my will when I was a kid, and I was always kind of like bored with it, but you know, I had Nintendo 64 growing up. Actually, my first console was a Sega Saturn, so I was kind of one of those hipster kids because everyone had like a Nintendo or something. And yeah, I was trying to like recreate the music I heard in the game, like Croc or something like that, or Knights. And then eventually, you know, I got Zelda, like most other kids probably did on the Nintendo 64. And yeah, I would just try to like recreate those melodies, and I would like kind of like embellish them a little bit. That's when I was like, oh, I could like write my own music instead of like playing all these really boring piano songs I'm learning at piano lessons. So yeah, probably around the same age when I discovered that weird laser show song.
And how were you able to create or mimic those sounds and get, because obviously the piano's got its own like sonic texture, or like you know, sound, but computer music, game music, that's a totally different texture. It's not dry. It's probably much more affected. How did you start to try and mimic? What were some of the first tools that you jumped on?
Well, you know, all I had growing up was a piano. But have you played Zelda Ocarina of Time?
No, I have not. I'm not really a gamer.
Oh, okay. All right. Right on. Well, you know, in the game, there's this instrument called an ocarina, which I have one. Let me go grab it so I can show you what it looks like real quick. All right. So it looks like this. This is an ocarina, and this is what was in the game. And in the game, this was like a way if you played a melody on this, it would do something in the game. Like you could make it rain, or you could make it fast forward in time, or something like that.
Cool. And so it's a flute, right? It's
basically a flute, yeah. Okay. And I think there's versions of it that can be like made out of a potato or something like this. But it's a very like pure sounding thing. It's not like a lot of overtones, so to speak. Maybe like a trumpet might have. It's like a very like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a very clear tone. You know what I mean? And so in that game, whenever the sound would be played, you could easily discern what the notes were, and the music in the game was quite simple, which I think, you know, as a kid, it was very easy to understand. And so I would try to hear it, and then I immediately would like run downstairs to where the piano was at and be like, do, 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 do. And I'd like run back upstairs and listen again. And then I'd be like, okay. And then run back downstairs. So, you know, I had to use what I had. So I would go back and forth between hearing something and figuring out the intervals and the tones, and then going to the piano because that's all I had to try to expand upon that. But I wasn't thinking too much about the differences between the sounds, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it.
But you were exploring the melodies and mimicking the melodies.
Yeah, it was interesting. Just because, like, even at school, I would just be thinking of these melodies. And I'd come home and, like, it's like the only way to make it stop was to, like, play it on the piano. I was, like, haunted by it almost.
So you started out obviously mimicking, then realizing, oh, I can kind of embellish, add an extra note, play that twice, pull out that note, play it differently. But then totally different when you discover that you want to start making something from scratch. When did that start?
So, like, you're asking, when did I start, like, making full tracks or something like this?
Yeah. When did you start? Yeah, exactly. Maybe it was a mental shift when you discovered that you can make something from nothing.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's when I started becoming a teenager and I got into, like, all the, I don't know, just like the indie rock, alt rock of the time. I think my first favorite band was Incubus, and I thought they were the coolest thing ever. And I had, like, all their CDs, and I remember I was at Ken Stanton, which is a music store. I don't know if it's just like a southeastern thing or if it's everywhere, but I saw a book on how to play the music on guitar, and I really wanted to get a guitar at that point in my life. So yeah, my dad had an old one he let me borrow, and as I was playing the songs in the tab book, I was like, oh, I just played a whole entire song on this thing, you know? And so, you know, drawing a parallel back to the whole video game thing, embellishing the melodies I heard there, I was like, well, why don't I just do a whole one of these? And then luckily I had some buddies growing up that had, like, the whole other array of instruments you needed to form a band. So, you know, I had a friend who was a drummer and a friend who wanted to sing, and we would make some really, really awful music in my friend's bedroom. And I remember there was this one time I finally figured out how to do a chord progression, right? Which was, like, the most exciting thing at this point. It was like a chord progression on a guitar, right? And he's playing, like, this most basic beat in his room. It's like, and we probably played this same chord progression with him doing that for, like, probably stretches of a half hour at a time. Like, we're not changing, we're not doing anything. And it just occurred to me that his parents were subjected to that, like, almost every other day. It's just, like, the same chord progression, the same beat. It's loud, dude. And it's just in the bedroom, like, in this small house.
And drums you cannot hide or
muffle. Oh, it's obnoxious. And I'm on this, like, little, like, 15 watt, maybe 30 watt powered amp. And it's just, like, I'm, like, playing as hard as I can, too, to, like, keep up with the drum volume level. But you know what? It was a song. You know what I mean? It was a half-hour long repetitive song. Maybe with my skills now, I'd listen to that recording and be like, you know what? This is sick, dude. This could be something. But at that point in time, it was obnoxious. But yeah, you know what? It was probably my first song ever that I wrote.
That's great. So I'm wondering what was, like, the first transition that got you into starting to record or sample or work on in the digital realm?
Let me think of that time, because I started on a program called Fruity Loops. You know Fruity Loops?
I know of it.
Okay. Well, Fruity Loops, geez, how did I even discover Fruity Loops, man? It was the LimeWire days, dude. So back when there was LimeWire, and like, all my friends were like, yo, you know about LimeWire or whatever? It's like you can get music for free. I think it was just like another Napster or something, but probably, like, more illegal. I don't know. But I was downloading, like, copious amounts of electronic music. And it was all like, who was I finding, man? Who were these names? Like, I think, like, Tiesto obviously was one of them. There was Paul Oakenfold, and there was, like, a bunch of other names, but it was a genre of music that I understood at the time to be called trance, which it's funny coming from that story I just told about that repetitive guitar riff. Like, trance music is so repetitive, dude. But I was, like, into it, you know? And I was like, how do you make this stuff? And I think I was just trying my best. Like, I don't even think I was using Google to find the answers to my questions. I was probably using like Ask Jeeves or something like that back when.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, Ask Jeeves, dude. I think Jeeves gave me the lowdown on Fruity Loops somewhere in some niche of the internet. And so yeah, I got myself a cracked copy of Fruity Loops, and I was just making some really ignorant sounding music, dude. Just like, I don't even know what I was doing, but I think it was just like a basic synthesizer, and like the music theory and everything was just awful. But it was cool, you know, because now I was making music that I could print basically, or like export it, and I could listen to it. I could burn it to like a CD or something and show it to my friends, which was legit, you know. It's like, yeah, here's my music, you know, and like everyone who's playing like in a rock band or something like that, you have to book studio time or something like that. For me, it was like a more express way to get an idea in your head and manifest it into reality. I don't know how to say it more simply than that, but it's just like, it's real and it's there, and I can share it now instead of like $60 an hour and a mixing engineer and getting all your friends together. So I don't know, I had to have been like 13, 14 around this time when I found out about that.
And I think there's something to be said too about doing it yourself and learning on the way, because had you paid somebody for the studio time, you wouldn't have learned all the nuances that you did end up learning by trying to do it yourself.
Yeah, it would have sped it up though. But yeah, you know, there's something to be said about learning it on your own. You find how it makes sense to you rather than someone already like distilling the wisdom they've learned and trying to like impart it on you. It's like whatever lessons you learn along the way by doing it trial and error on your own, they're going to sit deeper, you know?
Well, I want to jump into some of your music and discuss it in more depth. Alternate realities. We'll start out there. You've already discussed gaming and how that has maybe been a early influence on your style. Mm-hmm. Tell me about alternate realities. How did that one come to be, and how were you able to form that collaboration?
So alternate realities is a original soundtrack to a montage of CGI animation that's set to like a prompt where it's a person that's it looks like they're pulling or pushing against something moving forward. And so it was a contest where a bunch of CGI artists would do their own interpretation of that prompt. And then there was a panel of judges, and they rated the best 100. And then that was put into a montage about 8 minutes long. And Alternate Realities is the soundtrack for that 8-minute montage of the best 100. And this was all put together by my friend Clinton Jones, who goes by Punisher. He has a YouTube channel where he uploads videos that he's made and short films, and also helps people out with CGI modeling and Unreal tutorials he's just gotten into. And he and I are old high school friends, and we've stayed in touch. It's kind of weird that I moved to Los Angeles and like he was living like 20 minutes away kind of thing. But yeah, we stayed in touch, and he just asked me if I wanted to do music for it, and I thought that was cool. All the the video is mind-blowing. I don't even know how you begin creating art like that. So yeah, that's how that came about.
So it sounds like you almost had a pre-built music video, but now you just needed the music.
That's it. Yep. It was
nice. That's a great hack.
It's a great hack, dude. That's right. Yeah. So the music is definitely very much supposed to be in sync with the video. So, like, you know, each cut is 5 seconds long. And even on one half of the soundtrack, there's about 6 footsteps each character takes before it cuts to the next scene. So the second part of the song is in 6/4. So yeah, it's very much in sync with the video and what's going on in that.
Why did you decide to break it up into 2?
To be honest, it's just the way I knew how to complete the task. I was in the process of actually leaving Los Angeles and coming up here to Portland. So my time was getting spread thin between closing up whatever other projects I had going on then, this alternate realities thing, and getting all my stuff out of the Los Angeles place and, you know, all that. So for me, the easiest way to complete the task was to separate it into 2 songs and basically recycle ideas from projects that never quite made it to fruition and see if I could implement it into this alternate realities soundtrack. And I was able to basically make a clean divide between 2 different vibes. Yet they still had a continuation between each other, almost like maybe an EP would flow. So that is the reason.
I know that you're into philosophy, and I wanted to revisit a phrase that you had told me previously, and that was know how to start, but you don't really have to know how to finish. Tell me about that. What does that mean to you?
Oh, man, why did I go about saying that? It's like, I think, man, where do I start with this concept? It's like one of those things I just feel. I don't know how to necessarily explain it. I'll try my best, though. So it's like, you need to learn how to trust yourself. I think mastery comes from knowing your own creative process, trusting your own process, and it all comes down to this form of trust, and you have to be able to trust yourself. Trusting yourself is how you can begin to have confidence in your abilities and your direction, and how you start to form clarity about your purpose or your craft or what have you. And in my personal experience, if you have an idea of how to begin something, that's all you really need, because once the wheels start rolling, you can steer the car, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like a car that sits still is never going to necessarily go left or right. You just need to go forward to be able to turn the car left or right. As you begin, it's made evident to you along the path where you need to change course, or if the idea is even worth fleshing out to begin with. But if you're just contemplating something from the start of it to the close of it, you'll never really understand the nuance of what it's like to actually work on it. And I think everything I've started, I've always been surprised by the end result, despite having some sort of abstracted idea of how I felt it would turn out. It's always turned out different. Maybe there is an exception where it's just like I was so quick with the creative process that there wasn't time to really zigzag with it. But I think the best example I can give in some work that maybe people know me for is the Calendar Project, which is an album of 12 songs. Every song was written every month, and it was a brand new creative process. And for me, the whole project started when I just felt like it would be cool to go outside when it snowed with my field recording microphone and record some snow and edit it into like a rhythmic pattern or something like that, and film the process so that I could show who was following me just how I make music. But as I was working on it, I was like, this could just be something I do every month. But that idea would have never come to me unless I just started and went with something. And so I was surprised by myself just because I just got started on something I felt like I could get started on.
It's a great concept. I very much agree with you. I would obviously use different words and different ways of describing it, but it's so important to get going because, there's the phrase analysis paralysis. You sit there and you just think like, all right, how put myself in the shoes of a music producer or somebody who's starting out, and if they're just focused on how do I master, how does all these other artists do their thing, you're never going to get started. You're never going to make anything if you're just trying to learn. So you got to get started, and then the right question will come to you because you're going to realize that you don't know something or that there's a new obstacle. Because I think it's all about, you can't plan every obstacle. It's just
you can't
impossible.
plan every obstacle. That's well said. Yeah,
you really can't. So you've got to get going, and then some hurdles show up. Then you've got to figure out what to do to navigate those. But you got to get going. All right, I got to also ask, how the hell do you record snow?
How the hell do you record snow? Well, you can step in it, you can throw it, you could maybe chew on it. Maybe in retrospect, it's something I could have explored, but yeah, you just set the microphone down and you agitate the snow in any which way and it'll make a sound,
You also said something interesting, which was clarity is the greatest asset a musician can have. Why is clarity important?
Clarity is the wellspring from which every other fruitful endeavor you will have comes from, because clarity is how you perceive time. And I think there are so many things you need to do as a creative person, career, hobby, or otherwise, that you need to really just understand. It comes back to that trusting yourself thing, and that is a form of clarity. Probably the purest form of clarity you can have is trusting your own intuition, basically. And so when you have clarity, you know where to invest your time, because everything you do costs you time. And I think it's quite natural for people to understand the technical aspects of their craft they need to improve on. For me, it could be like downloading more software synthesizers, or it could be, getting the latest and greatest in whatever piece of gear, you know what I mean? But the clarity for me in that regard is realizing that there's a lot less I need to do. There's only a very, very few things I need to spend my time on. And that's what clarity meant for me, but it can mean anything for anyone. But as I get older and I've worked on this thing longer and longer, where I need to invest my time is becoming more apparent. And if I had this knowledge, where I need to invest my time earlier in my path, I would be so much further now, rather than whatever piece of gear or whatever, you know what I mean? But that's just what clarity meant for me. And I think if I were to tell someone else what that means for them, it's just self-awareness, basically. Not being so shook by the path your peers are taking, or whatever's in vogue right now with whatever creative endeavor you're doing, you know what I mean? Things such as this.
Well said. Does clarity in the music itself, what does that mean for you? And how do you make music that is lucid, that is not kind of overflowing with ideas?
Ooh. Again, I have to think about how to speak it, because it's something I just feel. I guess I can only talk about it from my own biased perspective on my own music. But for my own music, I have to really be kind of ruthless. Like the expression "kill your darlings," I think maybe is like a writing expression, where it's like you have an abundance of ideas, right? So you have so many ideas. And I think a younger version of me felt like you need to include every single idea. Almost like if you can impress yourself with your own song, then surely people will be impressed with the song. But it's such a flip-flopped way of looking at music, because at its core, music is a language and it's communication. And it's not in the best interest of the speaker or the listener to use a very complicated language or to convolute the message by using fancy adjectives or pronouns or adverbs or something like this in the music. You just need to get the message across. And so that really comes down to, what is the song trying to do? And is this thing helping that goal of the listener understanding the intention of the music? And tying this back into the parallel of having clarity, that goes down to understanding the intention behind each song you start, because every song you start has an intention. It might not be something ridiculously profound. I mean, maybe you just had a croissant for breakfast and that was like the best croissant ever, and you just feel so inspired to write a song about it. You know what I mean? But that's the intention behind the song, is that delicious croissant you had for breakfast. And you have to, as you're working on the song, like, how does the listener understand how delicious that croissant is? You know what I mean? Does this drum break help you with that? Does this piano interlude help you with that? Things such as this. So you have to really always constantly be framing the song from the perspective of being a listener for the first time. And that really requires you to pull yourself out of your creative self and into your logical self, and step away from your own ego, because I've had to like really let go a lot of ideas I think are so good for the sake of finishing music. And again, to draw another parallel to what we talked about earlier on alternate realities, that is a song of discarded ideas that I really loved that were able to come together in harmony and actually formulate a finished, complete song.
When you're creating music, how do you know what to keep working on, what to discard?
For me, I've had to acknowledge when I am forcing something. And forcing something is where you have an idea of what you want to have happen, but every time you try to run that idea by, or every time you try to implement some iteration of that idea, you feel this emotional block as you're listening to the song. It's like this thing that your brain just hyper focuses on. You know what I mean? It's like that thing where if you're driving down the street, like, you're not going to acknowledge every green light you hit, but you will surely recognize the red light you run into. You know what I mean? And you're like, this red light's taking forever if you're in a hurry, but you know, if you're in a hurry and it's all green lights, you're not even going to acknowledge that you've been granted access for all these intersections in the past. You know what I mean? And the same reason, or in the same vein, like music or a song can be the same way, where it's like a song just flows. You don't necessarily acknowledge it sometimes, but you know when it's not working. And the most frustrating thing is when you can't quite put your finger on why. And so when you try to throw a solution at it and it doesn't work, but you keep trying to do it because in your logical brain it's like, this should work, but it's not. You're forcing it, and it's just something that can't be forced. Just like with communication, friendships, relationships, romantic endeavors, songwriting is no different. You can't force it, and it's almost like a mental block is removed from you when you try something and it just feels good, but like logically it shouldn't work. You have to do something different. But I don't know if I'm even answering the question. Am I answering the question?
Yeah. I mean, you're getting around it. It's always a predicament. What do you keep investing in, and what is kind of stagnant, or what's holding you up?
You have to basically just be objective about it. You know, it comes down to that investment of time. It's like if you're forcing an idea and it just doesn't feel right, you have to trust that. You have to trust it doesn't feel right. So either try a new idea or let it go and move on to a new idea, like this whole skip it and move on thing. Start a new idea and let your subconscious work on it. You know what I mean? I think one of the best tools you can have is to take a break. Take a break from the idea that's defeating you in the moment. You know what I mean? Your subconscious is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than your conscious, and it will work to solve problems on your behalf while you try to engage in other activities.
That's interesting. Using the negative space as a tool, creating music.
Yes, the negative space. Yes, in all art, negative space can be just as powerful as.
But you're even talking about like the time you're putting into it. So it's a level different than the way I've thought about it inside of music. You know, silence or holding back a layer or whatever it is, that negative space. But you're actually talking about the creation process. Just let it go. That's interesting. For a bit, let your mind ruminate while you're doing other stuff. That's great.
It can be tough to basically acknowledge that you're defeated by the song and walk away. So sometimes it's easier said than done. You know what I mean?
For sure. Why music? Why did you choose music?
Oh man, what a heavy question. You know, I'm trying to avoid like a silly answer like I just don't know what else to do, you know? It's true, but there's something deeper than that. It's a language, right? And all throughout growing up and the awkward years and all the happy times and the sad times, you know what I mean? Like it really does connect with you in a way that I don't know why arranging frequencies and patterns in a certain manner has such a profound impact to like cut to the core of things. But for me, it's like the most efficient way to communicate with multitudes of people that don't necessarily speak the same language as me, don't have the same background as me, don't live in the same geography as me, you know what I mean? And it's like this tether between all these different, like for instance, like this whole conversation we're having right now is because of music, you know what I mean? And so for me, it's just the best way to build a connection with people. And it's so profound when you make an instrumental track and you see how people are engaging with this instrumental track and not a word was spoken, yet there's this like level of understanding. I don't know how that goes about, but it just goes about. So that's why I picked music.
What advice would you give to a young musician starting out today?
First of all, you need to just pick something to do. You can always change your mind later, and there's no pressure to be successful, because as soon as you put that pressure on yourself, you're gonna kill the purity of the music, and ironically enough, it'll kill the success the music might actually have by putting it on there. So if you want to, for instance, do like software-based music, kind of like what I do, just pick any software. It doesn't matter. Like I use Ableton, but Logic, Cubase, Fruity Loops, they all do the same thing, basically. So just pick one, go with it, have fun. You know what I mean? As time goes on, maybe you get an idea of what to do different, then do it. Then do something different then. But having all the best gear and everything like that, in my opinion, is going to be a waste of your time and money if you're only buying it because you feel like you should. So be careful about those things you feel like you quote unquote should be doing, because that's not coming from within, that's coming from without. And the sooner you learn to trust your intuition, that thing that's coming from within, the closer you'll be to writing music that you actually enjoy, which that's where the success comes from. You write music you like, and lo and behold, other people will like it too.
What are your favorite VSTs or plugins, or if you open a blank Ableton project, what are some of the go-tos for you?
So for me, I actually have Ableton open right here. I actually like a lot of the stock stuff Ableton has, but I couldn't imagine it being too dramatically different from other DAWs. Like, I find myself using the same compressor just about every time, and if only to use the makeup gain on the compressor. It's called Glue Compressor on Ableton. In terms of third parties, I use a lot of LFO Tool, but that's like a more technical thing. I use a lot of RC24 and 48 for reverb. The only like VST like instruments I really use would be like Omnisphere and basically Omnisphere, and if only for like their sine wave. I just use Omnisphere for its like sine wave, and I'll sculpt the sine wave for like synth basses or something like that. But most of what I do is pretty stock Ableton, because I work with a lot with audio.
And when you're on stage, what kind of equipment or what gear do you choose to perform with?
Very simple, actually. I use this little gadget over here called the APC40. And it basically corresponds to Session View on Ableton. So I have like all my clips or all my songs like stemmed out into drums, bass, instruments, or whatever I need. And I can like mix and match like parts of one song to another song. And so that's what this thing is really cool for, is controlling Ableton live. And then that just runs into a laptop with an audio interface. And that runs right directly into the house PA system. It's a very minimal setup. It's quite nice.
Yeah, it is. But it's very powerful to be able to mix and have such fine-grained control over each and every layer of every song. Do you kind of work with the stems, or do you bounce it into like a final stereo version and then just mix it kind of DJ style?
Work with it. Yeah, I mean, like, I work with the stems, like each individual stem has its own array of effects. And so you can do some really cool things. You can feel out what the vibe is of the audience. Usually there's like someone that's like vibing in the front row, and you just need to get them to keep vibing. So you can kind of like keep a piano looping from one thing, maybe like blow it up into reverb, kind of make like a wash out of that. And then you can start filtering in the drum beat from some other song you feel like is the right tempo for the time, or you can adjust the tempo for the moment, I think that's what's so cool about Ableton, is it's got this like warping function. I think other DAWs have it too, but I only understand Ableton having it from my point of view. But each thing is going to play in sync with whatever the tempo you have set, so you can control that live. And it's pretty sweet.
What purchase in the last 6 months for under $100 have you made that's most improved your life? Does not have to do with music.
Oh man, a thermos. Like, I got a $4 thermos, and I'm surprised at how hot it keeps tea. So I can like go for a long walk, and by the end of the walk, I'm like, man, some tea would be nice. It's already hot, dude. It's hot, and I'm like, why have I not gotten a thermos all these years? Like, it's hot beverage ready to go whenever. I can go way out there and have myself a nice cup of tea. It's really nice, dude. It's changed my life. It was $4 at Goodwill. I was like, this is the best.
Boom. Excellent choice. You mentioned the calendar project earlier, and you mentioned, I think that you started it in the wintertime. What month did you start it in? Did you start it in January?
I did start it in January.
Interesting. I was just curious about that. And did you find that the month deadlines was useful in helping you create?
Oh man, it was, until it wasn't. Like, I don't think the calendar project ended up being like a sustainable thing for me. I think that's more because I was doing everything on my own. So the deadlines helped, you know what I mean? Like, I got the music done. I must be honest, like, sometimes I released a song, it didn't feel like it was finished, I'm not going to say which ones they are, because some of them did really well, but some of those ones that did really well, I didn't feel like were finished, you know what I mean? So it just goes to show you that, like, sometimes it's all in your head, you know what I mean? Like, you might not think it's doing something, but it's actually doing something, But yeah, the deadlines were effective in keeping me on a schedule and making sure that I was actually producing something rather than endlessly trying to tweak something. So I was not allowed to endlessly tweak a song, which up until that point in time was definitely something I would do.
Come like, May, June, where you're like, maybe I'll just, give myself 2 months on this one. Or did you you had it locked in from January.
Yep.
You knew this was, so you committed.
Mm-hmm. I committed.
That's great. What do you do when you're not feeling productive, or you've got this month deadline, it's the 15th, you don't have anything out, you're not really satisfied with what's working? What do you do when things aren't working? How do you reset mentally?
Well, it just, you have to step away from that thing that's stumping you. And I know that sounds like such obvious advice, but it's really difficult to come to a point where you have to acknowledge that whatever you're working on is defeating you at the moment. And that takes some setting aside of ego. So when I get to a point where like it's not getting done, you just need to move on to something else, because you're just basically sinking with the ship at that point. I mean, and you're burning out too. You're burning out on music, and let me tell you, I've burned out on music, and it's not a good place to be in. So you just need to keep it light. You need to keep the whole thing flowing. You know what I mean? So step away and engage with things that bring you joy. You know what I mean? The music is not happening because of music's sake. It's happening because of something in your life. So you need to go and engage in those activities, be it like calling a friend, talking to family, playing video games, going for a walk, you know what I mean? Like, go do those things. And you know what? If you need to take a long time off of music for it to start coming back, then that's what it's got to be. You know what I mean? It's brutal to admit, but I've taken upwards of like 5 months off from music before. But it's what needed to happen.
Going back to Calendar Project, you've got 2 songs that feature another artist. How are you able to bring a collaboration and light the fire, the deadline, and get them interested in, working with your line in the sand date?
Oh man, that's a good question. Well,
and by the way, let me also ask, the tracks were started and finished in the same month, right?
They were. Yep.
Okay.
Every track was started and finished within the same month. So
yeah. So how'd you get collabs on board and like, yo, we got to do this real quick? Or whatever it was.
So, well, first of all, the people that were on board is one artist is actually in Los Angeles right now. He goes by Charisma, an old friend of mine, Ryan Lindbergh. He was living in Asheville at the time, so he was just a short drive for me from Georgia. And he's just a really great guy. He's easy to work with, and very talented, knows how to get songs done quickly, And the other guy I worked with is Jake McKinson. Oh man, I hope I'm saying his last name right, but he's a UK-based artist and goes by Vacant. And again, really great guy. Never met him before until I worked on the song. But I crashed with him and everything. Super talented, just understands his workflow. And so to answer your question, I went in just knowing where they fit into the creative process. So just knowing which roles each person is going to be doing. And the artists just also, they themselves understood their own creative process. So the music itself got done quite quick. And I think when it came to finishing the song, maybe I shouldered more of the like mixing, the like technical stuff that wraps up the music at the end, to maybe offload it from them. But yeah, just clearly defined roles in the collaboration is how those things were able to come about.
So for people out there listening who don't already know your music, what are the best platforms and links that they should know about?
If you want to give me a fraction of a cent on Spotify, then Spotify is great, And just because I think Spotify is legitimately great. I'm not trying to bash Spotify. Spotify's good. SoundCloud's good. YouTube is good if you want to see the videos I put out with the songs, But probably those three. I would say either Spotify or YouTube. And you can just search Feverkin on either.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here on the podcast, sharing all of your tips and tricks and kind of peeling back opening the hood under your projects and sharing some of the tools that you're using. Also really appreciate your mindset and how you approach things and think deeply about philosophy and life and music. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you for your time. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, cheers so much, man. Thank you so much for having me on. And it was cool to answer those questions. So I appreciate you taking the time as well to have me on.
Listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.